it's just so rewarding when like I put that first sound in Fmod and Unity and you play back. It really is an amazing feeling.
Welcome to the Long Game Podcast. My name's George Bafalukos.
And I'm Anthony Turi.
In this podcast, we'll be taking a deep dive into the world of game audio. Join us as we explore the careers, challenges, and triumphs of the professionals who craft the sounds that bring our favorite games to life.
From composers to sound designers, each episode takes you behind the scenes, sharing the stories and insights of those who play the long game in this ever-evolving industry.
Today, we're joined by Oscar Flores. Oscar is a composer and sound designer from Mexico City, currently residing in Portland, Oregon. He's the founder of the Waffle Robot Army, a group of experienced sound designers and composers specializing in games, cinematics, and trailers. He's worked on hundreds of Hollywood's biggest advertising campaigns, some of which include films like Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, Guardians of the Galaxy, Dune, Blade Runner 2049, and Top Gun Maverick. He's also worked on several game trailers for Apex Legends and Call of Duty, among many others. Throughout our conversation, we'll explore his earliest influences, his path to becoming a composer, and discuss the nuances of creating compelling trailers. Let's dig in.
Oscar, welcome to the podcast. Super happy to have you here. You know, we've spoken a lot online throughout this year, but this is our first time actually talking face to face. And I've told George a lot about you, and you've both had very kind things to say about each other in passing, but it's really cool that we're here to finally talk to one another. Can you give us a little background about yourself? You know, where'd you grow up? What got you into audio? And just, those general bits of information about yourself.
Well, first off, thanks so much, Anthony and George. It's a real pleasure to be here. So I really appreciate this opportunity. I was born and raised in Mexico City, and I'm a late 80s, early 90s kid. So that meant having the Sega Master System and the Sega Genesis defined my childhood. I played all the time with my brother. I'm not a very graceful loser, so we used to play a lot of beat 'em ups, and so we were both collaborating together. I also spent a lot of the time at the arcades, and this is around the time that Mortal Kombat and these arcades were huge, and you had to be in line just to play like the kid that would beat everybody. Also growing up, I loved cartoons, and I still love cartoons and anything animation. So I think the combination of video games, animation was always there. I love movies, of course. And something I used to do, and I think I've heard others say this, but I would put sometimes like the starting screen of a game and would just listen to the music. And one of the games I did this for was a game called Space Harrier. And it's a classic Sega game. And also Outrun, which is a racing game. And you had actually control over the radio, like it was songs. So it's pretty new at the time to have that in a game. But yeah, so that's the early years. At around 8 or so, this is an interesting story, I think, but my dad is the greatest salesperson ever, so he can sell you anything. So for some reason, one of his friends gave him a Casio keyboard, completely new in a box for him to sell. And this Casio keyboard was just there in our living room for days and weeks. And I don't know, my dad was probably not that interested in selling it. So at night, I would take it out and would play. I would just play, I would improvise, I would use it and then put it back in the box and it would be there for days. And then eventually it would okay, I just kept it, and nobody said anything. My dad didn't say anything, so I just kept it. And I think either I was writing good enough music at the time, I was probably 8 or 9. I just kept it. And from there, music was everything to me. Every day, just improvise, write music. Also, of course, music was very important to me. And it was at the height of some electronic genres, like really being very popular, especially trance. So this type of music really defined what I was doing. I love the melodic things I was hearing from trance artists. So I was very, very much into trance. But of course, I had a love for movies and cartoons. So I loved film scores and would listen to those. So it was a combination of a bunch of different artists. My mom was into 60s rock. So it was very good, and I think very important for later on in my career to have all the different genres. So then by high school, things in Mexico in the late 90s were pretty rough in terms of crime. And we had some, unfortunate experiences, everything. So it was sort of a time to move. Thankfully, my brother's also a musician. He was at the Conservatory of Music in Mexico City, and he got a scholarship to study in Kansas, to study flute performance. And so my parents decided this was a great opportunity to move the whole family to Kansas. And so I moved to Kansas in high school, We didn't know anything about this is Wichita, Kansas. Didn't know anything about it, but it was great. And so we moved there. We started high school. I'm still super interested in film scoring, music. I did a course of music for the media, which is now ThinkSpace, and they have courses on sound design, everything, masters even. But at the time, they had a select number of courses. And this was important because my tutor and later became my mentor, Jeff, he was behind all my assignments. And so I would do commercials, action scenes, animations, everything. So it was really, really great course. And this was right at the end of high school before college. So I was really happy. I finished this and I'm like, okay, I'm going to study music in college. The first semester, I'm a music major and I hate it. I hate the music school. This is not for me. But I still want to compose. I want to write the music that I want to write. I'm doing electronic music, my own film scores, hybrid, whatever I wanted to do. The music school was very classical, contemporary oriented. So second semester, I just changed majors. And what I decided to do is just to keep lessons with one of the composition professors and piano lessons, just private lessons I was able to get with them and finish my other degree. I finish school, and then it's around the time of the Great Recession. I don't know what to call it, in the late 2000, so 2008, 2010. And I was very depressed because I'm stuck here in Kansas. Not much is going on. But one day I decided, you know what, I need to move to LA, right? So I'm just going to move to LA and do something there. So I found the UCLA film scoring program and I just enrolled in it. And I didn't have a way of moving to LA. They didn't have any plan for anything. I actually bought a car in Milwaukee, Wisconsin that I picked up 2 days before my classes were to start in LA. And it was during a blizzard through Iowa. And it was a brutal experience. But so I drive back from Milwaukee without stopping, and I arrive an hour before my first UCLA class is about to start. I still have clothes in the car. I had boxes. I had everything still in the car. The class was at night. So I get there. So that's the first, how I get into the UCLA, the film scoring program. And from there, I'm doing everything I can. I'm looking for assistantships, internships with your Hans Zimmer, Harry Gregson Williams, John Debney, all these A-list film composers. And it was nearly impossible. You had to cold call and just anything you could do. So I'm getting really, really disheartened by it. I'm doing some commercials and a little documentary web series, nothing really major. I'm really, really struggling. Some days, honestly, like I had no money. Like my friend would be like, let's go out to eat. And like, it's either I go there or I have $20 for groceries, so I don't want to do it. And then I get a brief from my mentor, Jeff, saying, do you want to do this brief? This is trailer music. I really didn't know that much about trailer music. It hadn't been my focus. But I read this brief and he has some reference tracks and he like, if you want to write something, I go, okay, And I decided to just do something completely new and different. And I used a lot of my EDM background to just create something based on a signature sound, which is important because that's what defined everything I did after, which is signature sound driven tracks, which is basically when you just create a one sound and out of that sound, you construct the whole track. So I do that and I send it to him. He's really happy with it. A month or two later, I also get offered my first feature film. And the director is actually an actor I know because he was a bad guy in a very, very famous Jim Carrey movie from the 90s. So I was like, this is it. This is my ticket. I'm in Hollywood, this feature film. I get it. And it was just, it was abysmal. It was awful. Everything, and they were not going to pay me. They were like, you should be thankful for the exposure, for the credit. And of course, I have nothing else, so I have to do it, right? And I had to write about 90 minutes of music in about 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
Less than that. And that just killed me, almost literally killed me. I developed all sorts of health issues during that time. It was an awful experience. I knew that movie was going to go nowhere. I'm not mentioning it, but yeah, I knew it, right? So after that, I'm really, really depressed because nothing is really happening. I'm really struggling, really suffering health-wise. I don't have food, anything. So it's about the end of that year when I say, you know what, I'm going to go back home. Like I didn't make it here in Hollywood. I can't stay here. But it was the end of the year, and my friend Jeff, he sent me just this link, and I was like, okay, what is the link? And it was actually a Mission Impossible TV spot using the track I had done some months ago. And it was honestly like the greatest experience. I'm sure one day if I have a kid, well, that'll still be the second greatest experience to the Mission Impossible spot. But it was just amazing, And then he told me like how much it was gonna pay. Like, really? It was a really nice figure. So I said, okay. But I still went back home, and I really, was a little bit homesick, and I really considered just going back home. When I'm back home, he sends me another email and said, they want to use that same track in the trailer for Spider-Man. This is the Amazing Spider-Man. And I was like, okay. And then that fee was so much higher. We're talking well into the five figures. And so I go, okay, I'll go back to LA. And so that's really when I start and just focus completely on trailer music, trailer sound design, because I knew the fees were so good. It was happening. I could pay, all my bills, everything. And so I just did that, and I started, and I got more projects, more movies, everything. And it wasn't really, well, I mean, I probably should leave it there as a backstory. That's pretty long enough. That's how I started with all of that.
No, that's great. I mean, so you talk about getting this Mission Impossible placement, and that same track is used for Spider-Man. Can you explain more of the licensing process? Because I feel like there's a lot of people that maybe don't know exactly how the publishing works, or how the payouts work, or how it's even possible to use the same track for multiple major motion pictures.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Yeah, so the tracks are usually licensed non-exclusively. So, a campaign can license that track, or it can be sound design, is the same. They'll just license that for that campaign with a set fee. But if something else wants it, they can license it again. Now, sometimes, especially years ago, some of the studios would ask, is this getting used in something within the next 6 months? And if it was, then they would be more reluctant to use it. But I would say that's changed. It's more likely that you can use, even if they're happening at the same time. And with sound design, it's even easier, because I think most people won't recognize that it's the same riser or downer or whatever the element. So then it can be licensed multiple times for multiple campaigns. But yeah, unless it's exclusive. I've had a few exclusive licenses over the years. They're very rare in trailers, or at least they were for me. Blade Runner was one of the ones I remember being exclusive, and they said, no, we want to buy it. Like, we don't want any of the sound design or music used in anything else again. And the nice thing about exclusive is you can bump those fees even more. So non-exclusive fees are great, but the exclusive fees are even higher. So they're really nice, but from my experience, they were just very, very difficult to get. And they're kind of rare, but yeah, when you get them, they're great. And again, with sound design, it tends to be more non-exclusive. And so then you can license a sound multiple times. And I think I've mentioned this to you, Anthony, but yeah, with a single sound can earn, some people make income for the year out of one sound or two sounds because they license them so much. I was just watching some trailers recently, and both of them used the same riser that has been used in like every single trailer. So whoever did that is making a lot of money just from a single 3-5 second riser. Probably a very, very healthy income for the year just out of that sound. So yeah, I hope that answers that question about exclusive versus non-exclusive.
Definitely. And that's so fascinating to me, because I don't know of any other industry where something like a single sound could make so much money. So if someone starting out was interested in becoming a sound designer or a composer, and they were locked in on working with big ad campaigns, like major motion pictures, what would be your advice to them? What would be kind of like the roadmap towards getting into that field? Because it seems very niche.
It is very niche, and I get, composers sending music or sending more sound design based cues, sometimes sound design itself. I think one thing people don't think about is, and something I tell others is, if you want to write for these campaigns and movies that cost $300-400 million, your music, your sound design has to sound like that. And it really has to. So it can't be this ambiguous, oh, the music is nice and I did this orchestration, harmonization. Right. The production, but the sound itself just has to really capture that financial cost, right? And I think this is the hardest thing for people to really grasp because it is kind of vague, right? When I say that, but you can hear it. Like when you hear a piece of music within the first 4 or 5 seconds, you can hear, I want to say how expensive it sounds, but it doesn't mean that it was recorded with expensive microphones or sample libraries. It's just immediately. And I've talked to editors that will go through music and they'll listen to 2 seconds and that's it. Like they don't have time. 2 seconds of a track. They've told me like, I just grabbed 2 seconds from wherever. If the 2 seconds didn't impress me, that's it. And so I would tell people to really, really hear other trailers, other work, and really understand what's going on. Because trailer music on the surface is kind of simple in terms of chord progressions and some of this. And so it's deceptively simple. But once you start dissecting like what's going on, what's happening with the production, everything, it becomes a lot more complex. And I think this is where people really just don't seem to acknowledge this in their creations. So I would tell them to really focus. The other technique that I use, and I think this is something that people do in games when you actually test in game, I test all of my music and sounds against some other trailers, So if I'm trying to do an action, I open a Marvel trailer and I play it against. Because many times you'll write a piece of music, it's happened to me, and they're like, oh, this is brilliant, this is great. Look at that melody, it's moving. And then you play it against a trailer. Of course, it's not going to be synced to your track, but it just doesn't fit at all. Like it just falls apart, And then you can go back and say, okay, I know what it's missing. So I do it all the time. And I feel a lot of people don't even think about this, but you have to be playing it against the visuals just to give you an idea. And there are some YouTube channels that actually have trailers without music and just either sound effects or voiceover that, and they're great practice. I use them over the years all the time. Even, of course, if it wasn't perfectly synced, it gives you a great idea. Does it fit? Does it sound great? And many times you have to start from scratch or really adjust. So I think that is the advice I give to people. Like you really have to listen to other sounds, other music out there, and be very, very analytical and not just think that because it's music, it'll find a home or somebody will like it. It's very niche. It's very structured. In some ways, I mean, it's become more formulaic even than when I started. But it is for a reason, So, and music supervisors and editors are looking for very, very specific. And again, they don't have time. They listen to things very, very quickly. So you have to impress them in a matter of seconds.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a ton of sense because, like you mentioned, if you're working with projects that have $300-400 million budgets, if not more, they have the pick of the litter when it comes to music. There's so many talented people out there. So what they're looking for at that point is something very specific. It's very similar in game audio where you see a sound design role pop up, but that sound design role might be focused on UI or vehicles or first-person shooters and ballistics, things like that. So that makes a ton of sense that considering there's that much money on the table, there's a lot riding on these productions, everything has to be perfect. And I love that you mentioned how you have to kind of have a palate cleanser sometimes and compare your work to shipped work because you can really quickly hear if you're hitting that quality benchmark.
Exactly.
Even if not even on the arrangement or composition side, but on the mixing side, you can hear right away if the tonal balance isn't right, if what you're working on is a little too bright, or maybe it doesn't have the bottom end of this perfect Marvel mixed music. So I think that's a great piece of advice.
I think that's very true. I think, I don't know why this is, because of course it does have some production skills behind it, but I feel, and I don't want to say some amorphous concept behind it, but there is something that people have a very hard time understanding, because I get a lot of, composers sending things that sound more, there's a difference between epic music and trailer music. And a lot of people do epic music thinking it's trailer music. And it's nearly impossible sometimes to tell them what they need to do because they haven't really taken the time to really listen to the trailer music that is now very readily available. In the past it was hard to get the music outside trailers, but now you can find it anywhere. But some people just think it has the elements, right? And it does have all the elements of trailer music in whatever shape, because again, there's the hybrid orchestral, but there's the very sound design based music tracks. And just people really struggle with this. And sometimes it's hard to tell because, as you said, I think most of it is definitely the production. So they need to have the ears for balance and dynamics and the frequency ranges, everything. But yeah, it's one that I really try to tell people, like, focus, listen to this, play it against the trailers, and then be very, very honest, right? Because some people just really think this will make it into Dune, and it's not ready. Like you said, even in games, it's probably the same, right? You're doing a weapon sound, and you go like, "This is good enough." It could probably end up in a Call of Duty game, and the people behind those sounds would probably go like, "Absolutely not," right? It's just not there. So yeah, I mean, and it's helpful when you can have somebody tell you that. Like I said, with some of these, it's very difficult to really dissect. And because it almost sometimes they have to start from scratch, right? Like redo the whole thing, because you can edit, as you said, the arrangement and the music, and you can change the chords, everything. But to get to the essence of that mix, that production, everything just sounding really good is very difficult. So they have to start sometimes from scratch.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in any audio medium, reference is extremely important. Like I came from like EDM as well before I got into video games, and sometimes you would just come up with this fully fledged track and then you place it up against somebody like Cone Sound, who has like the best mix I've ever heard. And it's like, oh
Right.
man, like I couldn't even mix these two. Like if I were DJing, I could not go from this track to mine. Like the whole room would just stop, So I think that's definitely super important. One question I had, and one kind of like trend I've been noticing in the past, like probably decade, is when did the trailer music become very cover centric and kind of like adaptations of existing songs? It used to be kind of, yeah, like you said, epic music, orchestral. And nowadays you hear like a lot of Mad World and, things like that. I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a great question, George. It's definitely been there, at least since I started, right, in the 2010s. But in the last 5-6 years, it's just become everything. It's just everything they want is a trailerization, which is a cover version of whatever song they give you. And honestly, I think we're at that point. I think most trailer composers, sound designers, they do not like this at all. And it just keeps going and keeps going. But I think we have to reach a point where something new happens, because I was going to say this, and it's so good. And I heard about your background in EDM, and same with Anthony, that when I did a lot of my sounds, where they're very much based on EDM techniques, And at the time in the 2010s, early 2010s, it was new. Like these were new sounds. And there are some composers, trailer composer guy, Jack Trammell, that really did dubstep on every single of his trailer tracks. It was just dubstep. And his tracks were used on everything. He was so popular. But it was completely new, right? And you still have to design your sounds, right? Your EDM sounds for this. Now there's so many libraries that have even just specific signature sounds for trailers. There's so many. So it's just become, honestly, I hate to say it, but there isn't much new stuff going on right now in trailer music. I haven't heard anything new in years, like really, really new. Because in those years, 2013, 14, there was a lot of innovation in the trail music. Everybody was just trying to do something completely different, completely new. And, but yeah, now it's just cover versions, and they all have it's basically the same formula. Of course, every song is different, right? But you're going to do the same thing. You're going to add your drums, your risers, some brass and strings in the back end, and make some vocals from the song. Done. It's pretty much it. I hate to. I'm sure some trailer composers will think I'm disparaging their work, but I've done so many of those cover versions, and it just becomes really monotonous and kind of boring, honestly. And that's why, like game audio, to me, the music and the sound design, it's always pushing boundaries. Like there's always something new that you hear in different games, whether it's indie game, it's just always something new. So it's really fascinating. So I think in that sense, yeah, trailers right now with covers, they're stuck. Honestly, like they got stuck in a formula, and I don't know how to help them, to get them out of this, because I think the people I talk to, for the most part, they're just kind of sick of this, right? Because there's nothing really new. It's just it's a new song, but yeah.
Like especially if whoever's signing your contract, they already have a song in mind that they've already discussed among themselves. Everybody agrees, okay, we want a cover of this song for this trailer. This is the fee. It's like, do you take it or you leave it? It's like, yeah, and it sounds like it would be very hamstringing creatively to have to just do that over and over again. I mean, it's nice that there's a formula to it. You can do more because you know how to do it quickly, money wise. But as far as, the expression, that seems like it would get a little fatiguing.
The big problem with it, and I'm not afraid to say it, but I did so many of this, and honestly, it's always on a Friday night. They come to you and they're like, "We need this by Monday." And what happened is, like, we have the song we need by Monday, except the music publisher wants to listen to it on Saturday, so you can revise on Saturday, have it ready on Sunday, and present before the supervisors and the trailer houses, which are the ones editing these trailers. They present to Warner Brothers or Disney. So you really have a day to come up with these, sometimes even less than that. And even worse than that, you're not getting paid at all. People are just asking you to do these week after week, every single Friday. You're working on these, nothing. You're not going to get paid unless it licenses. And so when this trend was starting or getting a little bit more popular in the 2015-16, you had a really good chance of licensing because it was still kind of unique. So if somebody asked you to do it, you were the only one chosen to do it. But now they're outsourcing that to dozens of composers. So the same song is going to dozens of composers. Everybody's doing their own cover version. So your chances now of licensing that are very, very low. And very, very, very rarely is there a demo fee or a kill fee for this, and you have to fight them and everything, and they just won't. So that's been an unfortunate, I hate being negative about it, but it's just a very, very unfortunate development with trailers. And it just became because you're basically surviving on hope, right? That hope that this will license and hope that if I do the next one, it will license. And many composers are on that, you're just surviving on hope. So that's very difficult, and I don't know many industries where you would do that. You're doing custom work, and it's not only the weekend. When you do a custom song and they'll present on Monday, well, guess what? The client will have revisions, right? And so then you're going to work on revisions that week so they can present again either by the end of the week or next week. And that can go on for weeks or months. I had a track, I did a trailerization of a Daft Punk song, and I'm not kidding. I did probably like 20 different trailerizations of that same song because they all wanted for the next movie, and it was the next movie, and let's change it so it fits this movie and this movie. And to this day, it hasn't licensed, and I can't listen to that song anymore. Like they've yeah, it's just so difficult. So, I mean, it's worth mentioning, because I don't want people to just think everything is great and it's a fantasy. I mean, of course, if you license, and as you were saying, George, it's true. It's super lucrative, One of these licenses can sometimes hold you for the year. And that's what they're counting on, that you're so hopeful that if you get this one, you survive the year, that you'll do them, one after another and another. It becomes really boring, and you burn out, and that's, I think it's happened to me. It's just a burnout because you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again. And the money can be nice, but you still want to do something new, right? So yeah, it's unfortunate.
I don't know what it is about, publishers and the Friday night requests. I don't know why that's such a thing, but I've experienced that myself. And
I'm sorry you've experienced that.
Yeah, this needs to be done by this day, and they give you 12 hours to work on it. It's kind of like the tail wagging the dog sometimes. It doesn't make any sense to me.
No, I'm sorry you've experienced it, and anybody, because I don't know why it is. I've tried to gather answers, and I think it's, normally these ad agencies, trailer houses, they go home for the weekend, but they still have to present. They still usually have like an editor or two that are still working because they work overtime, all the time. But so I think it's easy for them to go, I'm going home, let the composer, we're done with this cut, let the composer, work on this, and they'll send it to us by Monday when we get back to this. I don't know what it is, but it's just, and especially if you have a family or you want to do anything, it honestly, it's very limiting in your life and very destructive, I think, psychologically, that you never get a break when you're supposed to, when everybody else technically has a break. Yeah.
It's a weird feel too, because it seems like you don't have the power to push back on these major projects, right? Like if you were to say, no, I don't want to do revisions, or no, I think what I did is right, they're just going to go to the next composer, right? They're just going to reach out to a million other people on their call sheet.
Absolutely, Anthony. Yeah, exactly. You don't have much power. And there's very few trailer houses and studios. So if you develop a bad reputation that you don't want to do these or anything, then guess what? They're not going to use your music next time, So you always have to be open to revisions. But I will say this in my defense of, criticizing this. When I started out, revisions to music were very rare. They would just use the music as it was. Maybe the editors, would always do something very creative. But with the cover versions, it just became like revisions are just the given, And again, if you're part of the company, you're getting a salary, that's your job. That's fine, That is what you're supposed to do. But you're not, you're not getting anything because the editors and supervisors, they have very nice salaries. So they're working overtime. They're making really and great benefits. Those companies offer amazing benefits. But as a composer, when you're a freelancer or even your own company, you don't have any of that. So I don't know. I always hope it's going to change, but as you both know, I think composers, we're the worst of the worst. Like we'll pay for projects, anything that gives us a credit or something, and I don't know how to stop that, right? Because there's no union, there's nothing really to help us, and there's just so much desperation to try to get something, and it's an unfortunate dark side of the industry, but yeah, I think a lot of people don't know. And I will say, I don't think people, starting out, like I'm guessing in game audio and sound design too, you have to sort of pay your dues, right? So doing some customs and learning how they work and being reliable, because that's another thing that people don't understand. When you're on a deadline as a team, like you need to deliver. So being reliable and trustworthy, all these things are very important, and those are things that take some time. So I don't think people starting out should say no to any of these trailerizations, these covers. I think they should do a few to gain that experience, because it's a very good experience. But after a while, it's just not a sustainable model, And I've unfortunately seen many brilliant trailer composers and sound designers just leave the industry because it's just not as sustainable. And psychologically, again, it's just super damaging, And there's other issues like with payments, everything. But I think that's why people try to leave and go to some of the close industries,
Yeah, I mean, like you said, like the whole thing is based off of hope. Like I'm surprised that you still have hair on your head, like doing this for as long as you have. Like that just sounds stressful. It's just like, your rent, your bills, your livelihood is riding on like, okay, are they going to like this revision that I've been working on for 3 weeks and not seen a penny for? That's a really tricky thing. And like Anthony, I think you guys were talking a couple weeks ago or a month ago, and he messaged us and kind of told us how that whole trailer fee structure worked and the royalty and how it can be really, really big or it can really dry at times. And it just blew my mind because I just didn't know that that's how I've never heard of that in another audio discipline.
Yeah, I don't think in any other discipline, George. Like when you mention to anybody, they go like, because, so, I'm trying to succinctly explain it, but when you license something, so say tomorrow they're doing a Marvel movie and they tell me we're using your sound design or your track, but let's say this Marvel movie doesn't come out until next, let's say September, right? So now that they may use it, because that's the other thing. They don't really tell you we are going to use it. They're like, we may use it. And they don't really tell you if they do use it. So you have to be on the lookout for these trailers and TV spots. So you become like CSI trying to find your music. Really, I mean, sometimes we've done some crazy audio analysis to figure out if it was our music or sound design because they won't tell us, It's kind of crazy even with that. But let's say, okay, they do use it. They are going to use it. Well, guess what? Not only do you have to wait until the movie comes out for them to finish the whole campaign, sometimes it can take an additional 10 months, 12 months to get paid. So just because right now they told you we're going to use it in the next, let's say, Black Widow 2, George, your music is getting used. You're excited. You saw the fee. You may not see that money for a year or more, and you have no control over it, zero control over it. And that is very hard, So when I was starting out, I mentioned Spider-Man. That was a very big fee, and especially if somebody had, at that time, really no money. I lived in a living room in LA with other roommates. And so when I got that fee, I spent it, like, let's buy a new computer, let's upgrade all this thing. And all of a sudden you're back to, okay, I'm running out of money, right? So then you have to hope on that next project license. So you have to be very good at administrating money, but even being very good at administrating money is just completely different than any other discipline, because any other rules about financial discipline, investments, they don't apply at all. but you need to put, when you get those good fees, you have to put them into savings, whatever you can do, right? But so it still has some liquidity because you can't just go and do stocks or something crazy. You need to be able to get that money back. But yeah, the payment's another one. I think a lot of people just, even if they're getting really good projects, if they're not good with administrating that and understanding the cycles and the payments, it can really kill you, because it's just very difficult. There's just no structure, no like 30-day invoice, 90-day. It's really, I mean, it happened to me this year, with the project. It licensed, I think like a year ago, and I got paid a few weeks ago. I was waiting for that payment for months and months, and again, there's nothing you can do about it. So it can be very difficult. Yeah.
That's so interesting. So I'm assuming you have to license your music through ASCAP, BMI, and then that has to be first, right? Before you even submit to the director, the music supervisor, right? Just so that you even have the ability to track it down. Is that how it works?
So ASCAP, BMI are just tracking your performance royalties, and you can register with them. So most trailers and TV spots will get you no royalties. There's no agreements. So those are more for like catalog music. If you're doing reality shows and those, you want to track those royalties. And the companies take care of that. For like the Waffle Robot Army, if you're a composer, you send the track, I take care of registering all that. And we're sending directly to the trailer houses and the studios. So BMI they don't really care about BMI, ASCAP. I mean, you'll have to give them that information at some point, but it's not really super relevant in trailers because, again, there are no performance royalties. Unless your trailer plays inside a show, like let's say a morning show or something, then you'll get royalties. But otherwise, yeah, you don't have to worry too much about that.
Okay. Yeah, that was just something that I was kind of interested in. And yeah, I don't want to hog it. Anthony, you got any burning questions?
No worries at all. I do have a question. I want to kind of switch gears a little bit towards video games because I know most recently you did some work on the Song of Awakening. You were the composer and the sound designer. What was that experience like? How did that differ from your work on ad campaigns? How was the philosophy shift doing like implementation and this totally different world that's way different from working just in the linear domain?
Yeah, good question, Anthony. If you don't mind, I'll just say that around 2022, I think, I was approached by EA to score a few of their Apex Legends trailers. And it was really, really exciting. But I think that was the catalyst for me because it was the first game and animation that I was working on after so many years. And like I said, I just loved this. So it was my catalyst to start exploring more about games, because I had ignored them because I was just into trailers. So in 2023, yeah, I enrolled at Berkeley's game audio production certificate. I started to make the switch. I really loved what the people were doing on Apex Legends, the sound design, the trailers that I worked on, the music. So I switched, I've been focusing much more on that. And I had this opportunity on this Metroidvania indie game. And I will just say that I am the sound designer. I didn't want to be the composer. So my wife, Katie, is a brilliant composer and she's doing more games. She's the composer. So I just wanted to focus on sound design and implementation. And I have to say it's been super humbling to learn all of this. I think you can get a little bit of ego like, oh, I've done these other projects in this other industry, like I should be able to just get into game audio. And I think some people do that, right? They just apply because you're coming from film or TV. But
I did it. I'm guilty.
Same.
I knew it was different, so I treated it with a lot of respect. And it's been so humbling, but so rewarding, And honestly, this indie Metroidvania has been more rewarding to me than, honestly, I think most of the trailers, if not all of them. It's just so rewarding when like I put that first sound in FMOD and Unity and you play back. It really is an amazing feeling, and it just pushes you to learn new things. I've spent all this time now, FMOD, Unity, Wise, trying to learn more Unreal, these things. It's just fascinating to learn more about all these things. So it is a very different mindset. I will add to all of this that, not to continue on being disparaging towards one industry or the other, but the people in games are just so amazing, and for me, that's been the most remarkable thing, the people. I mean, you, Anthony, like just crazy, like how much of a mentor and you're always willing to help and answer. And this it just blew me away, like the amount of support there is in the game audio industry. So that to me is just something that I love, and I can't get enough of that, how together everybody is, how everybody's working as a team. Nobody, for the most part, is about their own ego, their own stuff. It's about making this amazing game. So that's what really, really fascinates me and interests me about games and game audio, And I try to go to all the meetups. I drive to Seattle. I actually organized a meetup recently in Vancouver, for everybody there, because I think there's just something so special about talking to people in person that I'm really pushing for getting as many people, to meet in person. There's just something great, I went to GDC last year and it was just a terrific experience. So yeah, this is where I'm really, really finding a new purpose, and I really love it. I just, again, the people are just amazing. But yeah, it's just a completely different shift from Hollywood, it's just completely different.
I totally agree. I always say the people are 51% of the job. I feel like if you love what you do, but the people you work with make you miserable, it's almost not even enjoyable at that point. But if maybe you're working on a project that you don't love that much, but the team is awesome, that goes so far. And like you mentioned, game audio is a very unique community. I come from working in the music business, which is very cutthroat and a lot of sabotaging amongst people or people vying for limited spots, it seems. Whereas game audio, it's like, even though it is a very competitive and saturated field, everyone kind of uplifts everyone. You could have no experience and reach out to someone with 20 or 30 years of experience and you'll probably get a message back from them, or they're probably willing to get on a video call with you. Like everyone is just so kind and generous with their time, and it's so rare. So yeah, I just second everything you said about the community.
It's true, Anthony. I mean, I think at first I was like, okay, this can be, I was almost suspicious, because honestly, I mean, again, Hollywood is just very different, Again, it's more like what you're talking about, your experience in the music. I mean, it is combining sort of music and film, and everybody's just terrified that you're going to take their project somehow, Whereas in game audio, people are sharing their tutorials, how they're willing to share everything they know, which is really unique, because as most top producers and people in music and film, they're not really sharing all of that they know. They may share some things here and there, but it's very difficult to get those true tutorials. I'll just do a very quick anecdote here. I may have mentioned to you, Anthony, but some years ago, I reached out to this other trailer composer because I really admired his work. And, I just wanted to talk to him. And I found his email through SoundCloud. And so I sent him an email, just thinking not much of it. And his reply was like, "How did you find my email?" And so I replied back and I said, "Well, you have on SoundCloud." And he just replied back like, "Oh, time to take it down." Those are the kind of responses that you do get. And sometimes people don't even respond. And I have found in games, as you said, you can reach out to people in AAA. And especially, when you see them in person too, they're just so down to earth and willing to help. Again, you, Anthony, like such a great example of this altruism and mentorship and spending your time, trying to help me, or just, I'm sure sometimes I have these very silly questions, but everybody treats everybody very respectfully and understanding that it's almost like everybody's at the same level, whereas the other industries, it's very quick to have those power dynamics, like I'm above you. So, I'm going to control this conversation or this interaction. And in games, everybody, even AAA, in my experience so far, it's just everybody's so humble, and they all perceive each other as being at the same level. Nobody has this like, "Oh my goodness, I'm so above you. Like, why are you contacting me?" Right? So it's great.
And you mentioned that your experience working on the Song of Awakening kind of like gave you a new purpose in a way. So as someone who's already achieved so much, you've got all these big credits to your name. Where do you want to be in the next 3 to 5 years? Because I feel like the goalposts are always moving. Everyone has goals. And then when you achieve the goals, it's like you want more and more and more. So where do you want to be in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think, that's a very good question, but something I realized, and I think some people, it takes some years to figure out, but I look back some time ago at all my credits in trailers, everything. And I realized that honestly, I've watched maybe like 10% of the projects I'm working on. So I realized, okay, it's great, the credit, and of course it has social currency. And when you mention these things, it's impressive. And, I'm not taking anything for granted, but I've realized with games, I really, really love indie games. And so I would just love to work on indie games. I hate to say it, but I'm not a huge AAA person, and this has taken me some time just to realize. So I would love to be working on indie games. And obviously I'm a huge, retro or nostalgia kind of game. So this is what I'm finding I really love, and where I really want to concentrate because they really give me so much meaning and purpose. These kinds of games are what I enjoy. So So I just mentioned this, I feel sometimes people can enjoy AAA indie games, but it's so important to really focus on the games, or in the case of movies, that you really love, because I feel I made that mistake. As I said, going back to my backstory, I always wanted to work in cartoons, animation, but then the pull of the big credits and big money trailers kind of took me away from it. And I wish I had concentrated more on the things that I really, really was passionate about, were cartoons, games, all these things, So now I'm trying to find that again, like see if I can do that again, because I just really, really love indie games, So, I mean, what you guys do, like Way Forward, those are the games I'm playing, the Retro Realms, Yars Rising, River City Girls, those are the games that I love, that type of game, And I'm not saying obviously people love AAA games, but to really, really internalize and go, are these the games that I really love? Because I think it makes a huge difference, especially as the years pass and you get older, to really work on those things that you're very, very passionate about. If you can, obviously it's a very difficult industry, but so hopefully I can continue on that path, Anthony.
Well, Oscar, just know if I could hire you, I'd hire you in a heartbeat.
Thank you.
I second that.
George, I don't want to hog the stage. Do you have any other questions? Because we're coming up on an hour. It flew by somehow, but I want to give you a chance to ask any other questions you have.
Yeah, I guess just off that last answer, coming from like these big budget, Hollywood trailers, then going to like a Metroidvania style, that's a very distinct style change. How have you been acclimating to that, working on this indie game?
Oh, see, all great questions, George. Another one. I think at first it is a little bit, because I'm used to the big cinematic impacts and designing all this stuff. So, and this was much more refined. I mean, again, I just love the challenge, and I did so much research, and obviously I even asked Anthony when I could for feedback, because it is a completely different thing, George, just stylistically and what I had to do. But I love the challenge, and I kind of enjoy it more than it doesn't have to be bombastic, if I'm doing sword swings or magic spell, everything, it can be more refined and more abstract and, just pertaining to that game. I actually found it really liberating. So maybe that's also why I'm saying with AAA that I don't want the bombastic. I've done in some ways, I really love this more refined palette sometimes in indie games. So I don't know. I mean, when the game comes out, you'll be the judge, of how I did. But I'm happy with it.
He's being modest. That sounds great. I played the demo. I can confirm it sounds awesome.
Oh, Anthony was paid for saying that. Yeah, it's a paid opinion. We have to do a little.
No, I definitely relate to that, because I kind of spent all my time working like on a demo reel that's all AAA, very, action packed, this and that. And then I get hired at Way Forward and I have to learn how to do this kind of chip arcade style sound design. And it was definitely a challenge, but I feel that I'm a lot better of a sound designer for it, because you get to learn more about tonality and cadence that you don't really have to think about as much when you're just designing more realistic sound design,
George, yeah. And by the way, I think I just saw I don't know if it's your newest reel, but it's outstanding. The one that has Final Fantasy and some of the, I don't know if it's a new.
Yep, that's brand new. I haven't even really talked about it, but yeah, I just put it up on my website, and thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's so good, But I also love this, that you hear that and you go like, I need to learn to do this too, like learning from you, from Anthony, just watching the reels, and it's so amazing. So yeah, no, I saw it very recently. So
oh, that's awesome. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, but as I was saying, I'm also I was asking Anthony, because I've been playing the Halloween, the Retro Realms, and so I'm asking him about the sound, because again, to me, it's again, I understand what goes into it, right? Like if you do an explosion, you can't just let the tail ring forever. Like it's very controlled, but so good, I love, just learning like, okay, how is this working? Or just the sounds, the style, everything. So yeah, no, you guys are doing amazing work. It's really inspiring to me. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. That really means a lot. Really appreciate the kind words. But
yeah, really, thank you.
That's so sweet. All right. I think we probably hit our mark. You got anything else?
I think I want to give you a chance, Oscar, do you want to plug any of your contact information? Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, anything like that?
I don't have anything other than LinkedIn. And, I have my music website right now, or my Hollywood site. I'm working on a game audio site that should be up soon for that content. But yeah, LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn, through my website, through the Waffle Robot Army. If anybody wants to contact me, any questions, I'm always super happy to answer. I'm learning from all the game audio people. You know, you have to be very good with this. So giving back to the community too is very important to me. So yeah, that's where I am if people want to reach out.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time, Oscar. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great to meet you.
Oh, thank you so much. This was great.